Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Conversations on Conversations, where each week we explore a topic to help us have more powerful conversations with ourselves and others. I'm your host, Sarah Noll Wilson, and joining me back is one of our OG guests from the first season, Coach Nick, aka Nicholaos Papadopoulos.
Hello.
You win for the best. I don't know what it is about your name, but Papadopoulos brings me joy every time I get to say it. So, Nick Papadopoulos.
I'm glad that it fits on the screen, Sarah. It's good. It's good. That's why I did Nick Papadopoulos on the screen rather than Nicholaos. Just to make sure it's all in there.
Well, so for those of you who may remember, Nick and I had a really, really powerful conversation for me and so many people since then on men and intimacy. And if you haven't checked it out, please be sure to do so. And I'm so excited to be in conversation with you again. But for those of you who haven't met Coach Nick, let me tell you a little bit about Nick Papadopoulos.
You did it again.
It's just so great. Okay.
By the way, Sarah,
yes.
Nick Papadopoulos is the John Smith of the Greeks. Just a whole lot.
Oh,
longer.
Is it?
I needed to say that just for people for clarification.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nick is an author, speaker, executive coach, facilitator, consultant, and disruptor who's committed to inspiring leaders, teams, and people to live life purposefully and to transform the world. An energetic and charismatic speaker, Coach Nick has been a keynote speaker nationally on topics of transformation, men, inclusion, culture, engagement, and leadership. Coach Nick is committed to male transformation so that men redefine what it means to be a man, therefore showing up differently in today's world. He's been successfully running men's groups and retreats for over 14 years and currently facilitates 2 groups. He's had a top 25 ranked podcast in delivering male-driven transformational leadership topics called Dudes of Disruptions. I love the
Disruption.
Disruption, yeah.
Not destruction.
Not destruction, sorry. Yeah, disruption. There's plenty of podcasts on dudes with destruction. And so let's be clear, it's very different.
Yes. Right.
But his strengths lie in delivering leadership and team development, organizational consulting, and culture engagement, which are all designed to align leadership teams, inspire people to connect to something larger than themselves, and to create highly inspired environments. Welcome to the show, Coach Nick. Welcome back.
Yes. It's great to be back, Sarah. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be in conversation with you, but there's been a lot that's happened since last time we chatted. So what else do you want people to know about your world, your life, and you?
Yeah, a lot has happened, actually. It's funny you mentioned about the work that I do, especially the work around men. I went to a comedy club last Friday night, and I got picked on for about a second because the comedian said, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I run men's groups." And literally the comedian was like, "Huh? What?" Didn't know what to do. Literally went to the next person. Yeah.
I can't make fun of you because that's actually a very healthy thing that our culture needs.
Exactly. He's like, "What do you guys do?" I go, vulnerability, connection, community, support. Literally went to the next person. Was like, "Okay, you're going to ruin my show, dude." Hopefully I add to this show.
You will.
I'd say so. Last time we talked, which is hard to believe, it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
The good news has been that I've been in remission. I had, as you know, multiple myeloma. I had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma, cancer, and went through a series of steps to get healthy, including back surgery because the cancer caused breaks in my back. So there was cancer treatment, there was back surgery and rehab. But I would say over the last 2 years, I've been in remission, which is obviously the best news of all, rehabbing my back to get stronger. And what's happened over the last 2 years is that I've been finishing the final touches on a novel called The Men's Group. And it's literally
like a fiction novel or not?
Yeah, it's fiction.
Okay.
It's fiction. I would say it's I call it an inspirational fictional novel. So it's based on, the book is called The Men's Group, and it's based on a fictional men's group. Obviously, I have experience, as you mentioned, running groups, men's groups and men's retreats over, umpteen years. And it's completely fictional and super excited. I'm co-authoring the book with a dear friend of mine. And we are literally on the final steps, if you will, in completing and, then moving to the, securing a book agent, if you or any of your listeners know, would be open to an introduction. But yeah, that's been really, really exciting over the last couple of years, alongside, getting healthy as well.
I had no idea. I love all of that.
Oh, good. I surprised you.
You
Excellent.
did. And now I want to be an early reader.
Yes. Happy to. Yes.
And what I love, what's coming up for me is I imagine how the experience might be is showing what it can look like to be in relationship differently and showing what's possible. And that has been, I think every week, I think and/or say most people, like many people, don't know what it looks like to be in a truly healthy relationship with themselves or with other people. And that's not just men. That goes for all folks. And so that's really exciting. If there's things we can do, we'll talk afterwards. And then when it gets closer to publishing, then we need you back on the show to talk about it.
I can actually show the book and all that.
And I'll put it on the back shelf because there's going to be a spot whenever we have authors come on.
I love it. Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing. What?
Yeah, it's really exciting. And I do, I do believe working on the book with my friend colleague. It's actually something that we've been working on for almost 8 years now.
Yeah.
Not just the last 2 years, but I would say specifically the last 2 years being in remission. It has helped in my healing process because it has served as a North Star or part of that North Star, right? It's exciting to think about being published, and being an author, but more importantly, that's more of a personal goal or preference, but more importantly, the opportunity, what you just said, right? To be able to share whatever we have found in our experience, working with humans, specifically, men's groups and retreats, being able to share that gift, share the experience. I think so highly of sharing. Sharing is actually one of the core values of our groups. Because there's so many positives about sharing. And one of the positives or why it's a core value of ours is because when you share, to me, it's an act of generosity, right? Because you are likely informing others. You're likely informing others so they also have the experience of not being alone. Yeah. At times, right? To go, oh, you think that or feel that too? Oh, thank goodness, right? And, hopefully there's insights there that other folks can actually take on, and use and apply so that they can be or continue to expand their a life of being healthy, a mindset of being healthy and empowered.
God, this is why I love you.
Thank you.
And to be clear, when you talk about sharing, it's not explaining or telling, it's sharing. Right. It's sharing your experience. It's sharing how I assume, right? Like that's my assumption I make. So how do you define sharing then?
I think one of the criteria of sharing is to move the proverbial or metaphorical room, right? So that sharing is meant to be something that moves the needle for others, and which, by the way, includes yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to try to connect the dots here. There's a concept that a mentor of mine told me a long time ago, which is love the relationship more than yourself. Love the relationship. The relationship could be the relationship between you and I, right? We have a relationship, right? The relationship, that I have with myself, the relationship I have with the world, the relationship I have with my partner, with my kids, etc., right? So love the relationship more than yourself, because guess who's included in the relationship? You are, right? So you and I are in a relationship. And if I can love our relationship more than myself, I get included and get taken care of. You're included and you get taken care of, etc. And so to go back to the question about sharing, my invitation for obviously myself and others is to share from a place where you love the relationship more than yourself, that you get to share from a place of moving moving people forward, right? Because of what you share, how you share it, what's in the share. Again, does it give somebody some insight they didn't have before? Does it give the person the experience of, oh, I now feel gotten and known, right? Because it's not just, I just thought I was a Martian walking around this place called Earth, right? Oh, like Nick or Sarah or whomever, feels the same, is speaking my language, right? They're sharing a similar experience. So to me, sharing is about moving people forward, which is very different than venting, which again I think venting can be healthy. Just needing to be heard sometimes, but I think sharing is really has a purpose. I think the other thing I would say about sharing or its purpose is to get it out of your head. And this is especially for men. Men generally, I'm making a generalization, keep things in their head. They sort of, everything is in here, right? We're sort of processing in our head, which in a way which is really the cave, right? And if we stay there for a really long time, we're really, digging our heels and going really, really deep into the cave. When you share, the value of it is you're getting it out of your head. And that's actually how you can change your relationship to that thing, that concept, that thought, right? Those little voices in your head. And oh, by the way, we all have those little voices, right? Some of us have big, sales rallies in there and big, town hall meetings. But, or maybe that's just me. But, I think that when you get it out of your head by sharing, what you're actually doing, it becomes a vehicle to changing the relationship. Because some relationship to that thing, right? So, sometimes when you share that thing, you go, well, that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or, gosh, that sounds really paranoid. Or that sounds really unhealthy. Or the opposite. It might be like, hey, that's a really great idea.
Yeah.
Or, you know what? I'm even more excited now, right? By having, gotten that out of my head, right? Or by getting out of your head, you might be able to say, you know what? The thing that's been holding me back around, let's say getting healthy, right? Improving my wellness. I get this thing out of my head, this disempowering conversation I have in my head. Now I can actually tackle it. I can literally do something. I can take actual tangible steps around it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of sharing, as you can see.
I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone who said, no, one of our core values is sharing. And there's something really beautiful about that. And you're right. I mean, from the standpoint of getting space, of being, from a healing from trauma, that's something that I've learned in my own journey, is one of the ways you can process the trauma is talk about it.
Right.
So it can reduce maybe the heat. It can give you that space to see it differently. You get validation. I know this isn't what we're going to talk about, but I have to ask this. How do you help people, or what advice do you have for folks in receiving the sharing? Because so much of the work we do is around conversations and connect. I mean, we have very similar passions and paths. And specifically talking about men, right? A lot of my experience has been that they're not as equipped with how to show up when somebody shares vulnerably, right? And it's not just men, to be clear. I see that sometimes when somebody shares something vulnerably, I see a couple of things happen. Maybe they get dismissed. That's not that big of a deal. Maybe they get sugar-coated or whatever, right? Even if it's good intentions to minimize. Sometimes they're teased. And I think for me anyway, personally, one of the worst things is to just not say anything. And then you're like, oh shit, won't talk about that again. Like, hey, noted, not going to talk about pain with this group. How? So, you know what I'm talking about? It's like,
yes.
I don't care if you just, all you say is thank you for sharing that with me. Come to the ready with somebody who's sharing so vulnerably. So what advice, or how do you support people in how they show up when somebody is sharing? Oh, and the fix it. Sorry. And the fix it. Like, well, here's what you should do. That's another classic. Yeah. We should just do this. Have you thought about this? Like, oh, you're
Right.
cute. I won't worry. I'll tell my anxious brain, just don't worry. I hadn't thought about that.
Right. Exactly. Or the sympathy card. Um, like I sympathize with you, or like almost like, poor you.
Yeah.
I think that can be degrading, disrespectful, flatten somebody as well.
Yeah.
Just because I'm sharing about something, let's say it's something either traumatic or heavy or, upsetting, doesn't mean poor me.
Yeah.
I may not even feel like, I actually think sharing is not an act of victimhood. Sharing actually is, you're actually on the court. It's the opposite, so I don't need poor you. So I think that's important to avoid the, oh my gosh, poor you, can't believe that happened to you kind of thing. I would say the biggest or most important thing around when listening is to be a generous listener, and one of the ways to be a generous listener is to be with the person, right? And when I say be with, and I've actually done this exercise physically with people, right, where they're standing sort of almost like nose to nose, maybe an inch or two away from each other, right? Whatever can't remember how long, how far it is to be respectful of space, but more or less an inch or two, right, where you're being with the person, where the person's sharing, and without speaking, without actually any facial expressions or body language, you're actually putting yourself over to the other human's experience. You're getting over to the other side, if you will, right? Now, you might call that empathy. You might even call that getting someone or being gotten, if you're doing that with, to me, right? If I'm sharing and you're sort of getting yourself over to me. The be with is, for me, a way to explain that is clean canvas, clean sheet of paper. There's no story. There's no rap sheet. There's none of my interpretation. I actually don't exist inside of that generous type of listening, right? It's like, it's all you, and you've got this sort of open canvas, this open space where you can just express whatever needs to be expressed in whatever manner you need it to be expressed in. I believe people need what I'm describing more than the solutions.
Yeah.
I actually think the solution part is easier. I don't want to say easy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be disrespectful of whatever challenge somebody may be going through. I would say that when we feel like we're clear, and I do think sharing allows you to sort of, again, clear that space and get it out there. So now I can actually do something with it, right? I've said it out loud. I've said it a few times. I'm connecting the words to my body. It's there now. I think people are more than enough in general to figure out, okay, I need to go left, I need to go right, I need to go backwards, forward, whatever it may be. I think what they need most is that clearing so that I can actually get it out in a safe, concise, meaningful way, right? So that I can then do something with it. So for me, I know it's a long explanation of
I love
be
it.
with.
Yeah.
I would say it's a be with, which you said before, does not include any fixing. There's no fix it in that case. Now, do I believe it's important to acknowledge the person verbally or through, facial or body language? I do. Having eye contact, nodding like you are right now, right? Moving forward, if you will. Saying thank you, like thank you for that generosity. Thank you for trusting me. I also think a great question to ask is, how can I support you?
Yeah.
I would love to support you if that's on the table, or when you want or want that. And I'm actually, just as a sidebar, I'm very conscientious about the word support versus help. For me, help implies you, Sarah, can't do it without me or without others. To me, support is, I'm going to come from underneath. Like, you're more than enough already.
Yeah.
And you might be climbing a big mountain. So like I might just come from underneath and kind of boost you a little bit or give you an extra jug of water or something like that. But you're more than enough to know what you need to get up to that mountain. And as any human, partnership is important. So, having others, contribute is important, not having to do it alone. So I actually like the word support versus help.
Yeah.
And I love to ask the question, how can we, depending if you're talking to several people, support you and or when you're ready for that.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest mistake you can make is to go into fix it mode, to go into tell mode. Because again, I also think that when you go into that fix it tell mode, like, well, let me tell you what I think of Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let me tell you what I've done immediately. In some ways, it may leave the person either not heard, because you're making it about yourself. You might also leave them with, well, you don't really know how to handle this.
Yeah.
You're not more than enough to figure this out. Thank goodness you came to me because I'm the expert. I'm the all-knowing around whatever it is, career relationships or intimate relationships or whatever it may be.
I may have encountered a few people like that in my life. And if I'm being really honest, there's likely times in my life where I've been that person too. So let's be very clear and transparent.
I agree. Yes, I'm guilty as
you
charged.
You agree that I've been like that? No, I'm just teasing.
No, not you. No. At least not with me. But yeah, no, of course, I think we can all, go there, right?
Yeah.
So it's about practicing how to be a generous listener. I actually never liked the word active listener. I know, especially in the corporate space. First of all, I don't know what that means, but I don't know. There's generous listening, a generous, engaged, connected listener, which is how I frame listening, if you will. I believe when you activate those ways of being and that kind of listening, I do believe people share differently. And they share more and surprise themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're sharing into a space that is generous, connected, and engaged. And engaged has nothing to do with, again, solutions or telling somebody or giving them advice. It's really about just, okay. I've actually seen people share so powerfully. Let me say it differently. Because I actually facilitate listening exercises like this, where the listener was so generous, connected, and engaged that the person shared and then came up with their own solution at the same time. Because the person listening was being with them in that way that allowed the person the opportunity to roam around, if you will, in that space, and kind of explore and make their own connections, deductions, and get to a different place.
The visual of be the blank slate so that they can throw stuff. This happened just yesterday with my Nick and I. It's a little confusing having two Nicks on this, but everybody's familiar with my Nick. A tough situation and with a client. And I basically just went to him. I said, I just need to process this with you out loud.
Right.
And I know one of the things that's so helpful for me is, and it's something I'm trying to do a better job of, is kind of checking in with people with what do you need right now? And,
absolutely.
Right. And after, and this is something my Nick does a really nice job of, would it be helpful if I shared how I'm reading this? Would it be helpful if, and sometimes it is like, yeah. And that idea of, my coaching training was all about everyone is whole, resourceful, and can solve their own problems. And I love that visual of, hey, even telling somebody, you know what, I'm just going to be a blank slate for you. Like you just throw it all out. And my observation is that sometimes we jump to solutioning because we're uncomfortable with the vulnerability and we want to resolve it either for them and for us, or maybe just us. Also, when you're in the work environment, you're solving problems all the time.
Right.
And now we're asking people to show up differently. And we also, our brain gets rewarded for being right? Like there's also that biology, but it is such a gift to be a generous listener and think of, I just, that visual is very powerful of, I want to be a blank slate.
Yeah. What you just said, Sarah, about sometimes we're uncomfortable, right? Which is to connect it back to something I said a few minutes ago, that when you're in this be with, and you're being generous, engaged, and connected, and you're putting yourself into the other person's world, right? You're sort of, you're kind of, and by doing so, you make yourself invisible. What I really mean is remove your ego, remove yourself, so that your, let's say, uncomfortableness with vulnerability or with the content that the person is sharing, you remove yourself from it. Because if you don't, then it's not an open slate. It's not a clean canvas, right? A clean sheet of paper. It's got your name and all of your stuff now, right? And so it's no longer my share. It's now yours or ours. And that's not what I need sometimes. I just need to hey, I just need to throw the paint up on the canvas and just see where it lands for a minute.
Yeah, I want to draw this connection to the topic that we had talked beforehand to share, because I think it's a very natural transition. There's a lot of folks that I've worked with or lived with or loved, and it's been true of me, that there's these rules we create about who I am and how I show up. There's rules about my identity, so to speak, about just how I show up in relationships. I'm thinking about listening, for example. I was working with a team a couple of months ago, and we were talking about this idea of, I like using the language of listen to learn, right? What can you learn about the other person and the situation? And and the response was the sarcastic, "What, you mean I gotta listen now?" Because the identity for him was, I'm not soft. I'm not, I don't, like, somewhere he was shaped and informed that was a weakness and a bad thing, and he couldn't resist.
Right.
So I feel like that might be a natural transition. I mean, I could talk about listening and sharing, and I mean, this could be our topic. And I think this topic of identity is so important, and one that we haven't talked about enough on the show.
I love the segue and introduction of where we find our validation, our identity, right? Listening is a really good place to look, because, especially as men, often we've, or even as a coach, right? As a business coach, as an executive coach, it can go through my head to say, Sarah just shared this. If I want to be a valuable coach, I must respond, right? Or I must ask the right question, right? To be valuable to her. Rather than the doing may be just the be with, rather than, having to actually, physically do something or say something, right? So it goes back to my point about ego. Our ego can get in the way. And the ego can get in the way because we identify. So, using again myself as an example, well, I'm a coach, I'm a facilitator, I'm a trainer, I'm a consultant, right? I'm Nick, I'm Coach Nick. I've got to have a response here. My kid just asked me a question, about something. I must be able to impart wisdom. Otherwise, I'm not effective. And it can do a real number on everybody, right? Because, the thing about identifying with your work and getting validation, either exclusively, mostly, a lot of the time, is that there's no finish line. There's never enough evidence that I'm a good coach or something different, right? Never. You laugh.
Oh, just that hits.
Right.
That's a painful laugh. That's a very
you want to cry, actually.
Keep going on. There's no evidence. And I'm just send me your invoice for this therapy session.
There's never going to be enough evidence that when I say you, I'm including myself. There's never enough evidence that you are smart enough, that you are good looking enough, that you are funny enough, that you know enough. There's never going to be enough evidence if and when you are attached to external validation. When you are attached and even addicted to the external validation, and many of us, regardless of gender for that, this has nothing to do with gender actually, regardless of gender, if we are attached to whatever identity we have, it is a recipe for disaster, because that's when you become exhausted. That's when you feel less than. That's when you start comparing yourself to others. That's when you have trouble celebrating other people's successes or other group successes. That's when you even stop learning because, well, Sarah's more successful than I am. And so now I go back into my head with that committee and that town hall with all the little voices, instead of learning about what you, Sarah, are doing, sharing, saying, whatever, your approach, whatever. I can't even learn from it because I'm so filled with envy, jealousy, beat up for myself. I can't even appreciate. I can't learn anything in that case. So it can be really, really dangerous, actually.
Yeah.
And really, really unhealthy.
I see this show up a lot when people are maybe they're laid off.
Right.
They retire. I do a lot of work with folks who are retiring after being a CEO, and they've had all the power and the privilege that had come with that. And that's one of the biggest questions that clients will ask is, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
And there's a sadness to that. And that's something that I've been working on personally, is trying to get really clear about what is the life I want? How do I want to show up? How do I want to spend my time? And even as a business owner, it's so easy to, especially, we have a global audience. So let's speak explicitly through an American culture perspective. Hustle is king, right? Growing at all cost is the sign of success. And I've been trying to really untangle myself from, how do I actually want to be? How do I want to feel? How do I want to show up? What are the relationships that I want to have? And measuring my personal success differently. Right. It's so easy to be seduced by did we hit our numbers? Didn't we?
Right.
It's so easy to be seduced by, did we get the clients we want or didn't we? Instead of, like, for me, it's like, am I spending more time with my husband and my parents? That's success. Am I resting and sleeping well at night? That's a form of success. Right. But it's really hard to untangle when all the messages you get is, you should be busy, you should be hustling, you should be whatever. And I know a lot of folks who are questioning things, especially sort of as we're in this phase post-pandemic or in this phase of the pandemic, of really thinking, well, I don't want work to be my only identity.
Right. Absolutely. I shared with you offline about how when I was in the heat of the cancer journey, the treatments, the rehabbing of my back, I was crystal clear. It was like, no, it was like right there in front of me that I was the most successful person, or one of the most successful people in the world, because I always said cancer had, or what I got was cancer had zero chance against my friends, against my family, against my people, against my circle. Like zero chance, because the quality of those relationships, the depth of those relationships, the meaning that we were getting, the learnings that we were getting. I guess it's no coincidence for myself. My favorite movie is It's a Wonderful Life, which every year on Christmas Eve, I torture my kids to watch. And they always say, why do we need to watch it? We know what's going to happen. Although they were crying this year because they noticed new things. And I said, okay, well, speaking of listening, you want to listen differently as if you're watching it the first time. And lo and behold, they got something different. And, at the end of the movie, and I know I may spoil it for a couple of people who may not have seen this movie, but the main character is celebrated for being the quote unquote richest man in town. And it has nothing to do with the amount of money. It has to do with his friends and family rallying around him. And I really, really embodied that sentiment. And it's really interesting. I was sharing with you offline how over the last 2 years, I have found myself deviating from that or disconnecting from that, right? And comparing myself, especially for me specifically, am I making the amount of money that I want to be making, which then leads to comparing myself to others. Do I have the right title, which then has me comparing myself to others? Am I involved in the right kind or the interesting kind of projects, which then has me comparing myself to others, right? And I found myself, to be honest with you, really down in recent past. Really down. It was really fascinating, subdued, lower energy, almost feeling a bit flatlined, all because I had been taking inventory of I'm not enough because of career. I'm not enough because other people let's just say in my field or similar field or interest are in a different place, which again, I go back to what I said moments ago, is a recipe for disaster. Comparing myself or setting goals compared to some outside external standard, there's never going to be enough evidence that I am providing value or that I am more than enough. It has to start internally. It has to start within myself. Me choosing me so that I get how much I matter. Because if I don't start here, I'm always going to come in. Not even second place. I'm going to come in third or fourth place.
Yeah. It's the first coach I ever worked with. She had this great phrase that was, I might butcher it a little bit, but anytime you aim yourself against someone else's target, you're going to miss.
Yeah.
And it's so hard. It is so, I'm with you. There are times when I can be so strong and connected and proud of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and proud of the decisions that I'm making, or proud about how I'm showing up in my relationships or with my health, with myself. And then there are just times where that little slug gets in your brain. You're like, I'm a piece of shit. I don't even know why I'm doing this. Like, I don't know anything about it. And speaking from my own just personal experience, that's a struggle. And it makes me think of a conversation I had with my good friend Farah Harris, because she had gotten this amazing opportunity. And I was super envious. And it caused a lot of doubt for me of, well, why haven't they reached out to me? And I said, and I think I said something like, that's really cool. And I'm going to be honest, I'm envious. And bless her, like a couple days later, she calls me. She said, hey, we need to talk. Because in my relationships, I don't want envy to exist. And it was a totally fair call out. And the language she used that I really loved a little bit in the moment is, I'm so happy for you and I'm hopeful for me.
I like that.
As a way to kind of hold that of, I'm really happy for you and I'm hopeful for me. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay too, right? It's hard. And obviously, right, like the science is pretty conclusive of social media, right? We can edit our lives and we can just show the best part of our lives. And we think everyone has their shit together. And that's not the case for most people, right? And anyone who's a human doesn't, they're figuring it out. But it is hard. And the other thing that's coming up for me as I'm reflecting on what you've shared is the amount of control and influence we give to other people or things outside of our control about who we are and how we feel and our value as a human. I mean, that kind of feels profound for me in this moment, thinking about that.
It is. We actually just to ride your coattails, we literally give all our power away.
Yeah.
And it's funny, a lot of people take pride in being controllers, and including myself. I would probably fall into that category, and I give my power away. I have no control then, right? Because I have no idea what the external world is going to do, not say, right? So as a controller, I'm actually setting myself to lose, and I'm setting myself up for disappointment, right? So if you want to use, a different strategy, which is, hey, I'm a proud controller. Great. I'm going to just focus on me. Like what's my truth, right? What are my unique talents, right? What's my contribution to the world? What fills me up? Because I can control that for the most part. I can certainly influence it. I love to watch dramas, movie. I love to watch it. Well, I can control that. I can watch those versus, waiting for somebody else to take me to the movies, right? I could be waiting all day for that, right? I know it's a silly example, but you have no control of that. You don't know you have no idea what's happening over there. I know what's happening over here. So it is interesting that we give our power away so easily.
Yeah.
Which then makes us even more upset. So not only am I envious, not only do I feel less than, and now I'm beating myself up because I'm dependent on you. I actually think it's an addiction. Honestly, we're addicted to comparing ourselves. We can be addicted to these standards that we set. One of the things we talk about in our men's group, but in general in our conversations, is that it's all made up. The whole darn thing is made up.
Yeah.
Literally, it's all made up. It's all made up. And I always like to say, well, if you can really buy into that we were sort of born into and assimilated and socialized into a matrix that existed before we physically entered this world, okay? We enter this matrix that's got its ground rules and its red lights and green lights, right? And it's got 7 days a week and all these things that have been sort of, the infrastructure, if you will. It got created. Well, that's your good news, because then your good news is that if it's all made up, then I can go ahead and make up stuff that's going to serve me and my truth while also serving others and being in contribution to them. If that makes sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah.
And I think that can be a really, really exciting place, right? So just to use a personal simple example, I started running men's groups. I mean, now it's more, it's whatever, 16, 17 years now. And I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, nobody was doing men's groups. I just made it up. I'm sure others did as well. So I'm not taking credit for the concept or the structure. I'm saying that in my circle, it was not, like a possibility. Made it up. And guess what? Here we are, years later, and it seems like, folks have been positively impacted. I know personally I feel filled up. It seems like it's created other opportunities, right? I just think that we rely way too much me say differently. We rely too much on others, but we give others way too much credit that, I entered this matrix and, much smarter people than me, must know something to create this 7 days a week concept and this red, yellow, green light concept. And, we drive on a 2-lane road or whatever. It's all made up. It's all made up. And it's really important to get connected to your truth, what fills you up, what's important, while also, again, can it make a difference for others? Can it, bring people together to be more loving, more respectful, more inclusive, whatever it may be that's positive and fulfilling as well. So I think it's really important. I did, my very, very first coach did this exercise with me, which I have stolen from him, of course. But he did a speaking of identity, he said, tell me all the hats you wear in your life. Mm. Right. Now at the time I was single, I didn't have kids. Right. But if I was doing it now, right, I'm a dad, I'm a brother, I'm a son. I head up the learning and employee engagement and talent management for a health insurance company. I'm a facilitator of men's groups. I'm a domestic partner, right? I can keep going. I'm a citizen of the United States, right? I wear all these different hats, right? And he then started to take each hat, each role away. And then there was just sort of Nick. Mm. And even Nick is made up, right? Somebody made it up. Someone just gave me that name, right? But it was interesting. He said, when I take all those hats away, facilitator, coach, dad, brother, et cetera, son, what are you left with is just you. And I remember having at that moment this really immense sadness. And he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, what would you give yourself? And I remember giving myself, I think, a 4 or 5 at the time. And in that moment, there was sadness. And in that moment, there was also the aha, which is, boy, oh boy, I am really addicted. I am addicted to being a brother and being a son and being, a worker at this company, and being a director of such and such. I've literally given all my power away, because what he did was he just kind of he stripped everything away, and it's like, and then you're just left with with me. And to be a 4, I mean, gosh, think about, it's almost how nuts that can be, that I'm giving everybody else more credit than giving myself. And so the aha was, and still is, because it's an ongoing conversation. Well, who am I? What's important to me? What fills me up? What turns me on? What inspires me? What are all those weird things that I love to do that I don't care what others, as long as I'm being respectful and responsible, right? I love going to see movies. I don't care. You want to think I'm weird and I might go by myself? Okay, no problem. I like to sit in the dark on a Friday night and watch my, New York Yankees play, I get filled up by doing that, right? It was a really, really important moment for me, because I realized how much I need, or how much I define myself, not just by those roles, but I was defining myself by the results. That results ain't me. The results are a part of you. It's part of your experience. But it's not all of me. That doesn't tell the entire story. That is really being short-sighted on my part, or anybody's part, to say the result I produced in this role means I deserve a promotion, or I have worthiness. No way. Maybe you don't get the same bonus because those are the rules that you created at work. You didn't, hit a particular number, but that doesn't define your self-worth. And what you bring, your uniqueness. Yeah.
And there's so much, the timing of this conversation is really lovely, because one of the previous episodes that's going to air, I think 2 weeks before ours, is a conversation I had with my colleague, Dr. Teresa Peterson, about unlearning is just as important as learning something new. And,
I love that.
And as I think about my journey with my identity, I've been shaped by being a woman. I've been shaped by being a white woman living in the Midwest. I was shaped by growing up Catholic. I was shaped by, I say this with love, but I was shaped by the trauma and anxiety and everything that my parents brought to the table. Right. I was shaped with the beliefs about the world, finances, all of that. And it really has been this ongoing evolution. And it's something Nick and I, we talk about a lot, especially inspired from the conversation we had with you 2 years ago of how much gender roles, especially in American culture, confine us to who we are. The thing that's so fascinating, and I'm sitting here, as you talk about and this brings me joy, and I'm looking at my wall of Disney Loungefly bags. This is my newest, and I've had to really work through being okay. This sounds so dumb saying out loud. I'm going to share with you.
Yeah, do it. Do it. Big moment. The big reveal. Here we go. You heard it here, folks, first.
It's so not. They're going to be like, but one, I've never collected anything in my life.
Okay.
Right? Because I just never did, never was into anything. But I love these bags. They make me so happy. You might notice people who are watching, there's a few Easter eggs. They're kind of hidden there. And I've had to work through being okay that that's how I'm going to spend my money. It makes me super duper happy. Right. And I'm so fortunate. I will say this. And sometimes met with, wow, how many bags do you have now? Do you have too many bags? And then I was like, maybe I have too many bags. And my Nick has been so good with, does it bring you joy? Right. Are we fine financially? And I'm like, I don't care, because there'd be times where I would say, but I could resell this. And he's like, don't. Right. Use it. And even when you intellectually know, even when you've done the work, I've been doing so much work. There are just these moments where you're pushed against who am I really with who have I told myself I am, because it's been shaped by everything that's just, again, it's just a social construct. And I think that's such a gift of, this was all created. So what do you want to create for you? And sorry, real quickly. Yeah. And something that I've become so passionate about personally and professionally, just in my relationships, is don't support someone else in their joy. Support don't criticize, don't make comments about, don't minimize. If it's not your thing, cool. It's not your thing. Right. And there's so much power in saying, I love that makes you happy. Does Nick get excited about my bags? No, but he gets excited about me getting excited about my bags. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like, don't yuck the yum. I know that that's a term used in other ways, but it's true. Absolutely. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. What you're describing is a form of success, meaning you have discovered something about yourself that inspires you, turns you on, fills you up, right? To me, it's a form of success because you have a partner. Of course, it helps that his name is Nick. I mean, just saying, you found a partner who supports you, right? Because there's a lot of people out there who don't have that, as you're describing, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a way to define success that's very different than I'm successful because my podcast hit a certain number of views or downloads. And I'm not saying not to pay attention to that by no means, or by the amount of money you've made or making, right? Or, how many new clients, corporate, individual, whatever it may be. I just think that there's an opportunity as a whole, as a general sentiment, and I'm included in this, to redefine what it means to be successful, right? And so if we're so addicted that we need to put the amount of money or the number of houses we have or the number of trips we take as part of our success, okay, as long as we're also including that you discovered your love for these bags, that you discovered how you have people in your life, i.e. your partner, who support you, right?
I had a conversation with my sister this week. In fact, actually, it was Monday about. I swear we have less intense conversations like this, but we were talking about generational trauma.
Sure.
Because we had done a conversation about generational trauma in my men's group, and a lot stirred up for me, even as the facilitator. And we were having this conversation, and she acknowledged me about what I went through. I'm older than she is. And so she acknowledged my experience as someone who, as a sibling, right? Sort of from afar going, yeah, I could see how some of that generational trauma was transferred to you. Being the eldest, it had a different impact that it had on, my sister who was younger, et cetera, right? She was acknowledging me. And I remember getting off the phone going, man, I am the richest man in town because I have a human like this in my life. I have a human like this in my life that I can have conversations with. And I thought, yes, maybe Sarah has more clients than I do, or somebody got something that I didn't get, or my bonus wasn't, or whatever it may be. I didn't get the promotion. And sure, I'm not saying not to pay attention to it. But if you're going to do that, then you better pay attention to that conversation that you're having on a Monday night that really leaves you, honestly, to me, it was one of the greatest gifts, that conversation, because I really felt like, oh man, I'm not a Martian. That to me is worth 3 promotions. It's worth 2 houses. And I just think it's time that we redefine what it means to be successful. And I do believe we need to look at our relationships, first starting with ourselves, right? Are we seeking out our truth? Are we connecting to our truth? Are we celebrating our truth and nurturing and expanding it? And then inside of that, how are we interacting with the people around us at home, at work, et cetera, in our community? And start judging our success by the quality of those relationships, the depth of those relationships. I mean, there's the research. I might butcher this research, but I know I've seen and heard it in a bunch of places. I was listening to Michelle Obama's book, and she was talking about how I think half the Americans, there's some research in 2021, half the American population in the survey, let me say it differently, half the people in the survey in the US don't feel like they have any quality, meaningful relationship in their lives. I mean, this sort of notion of loneliness being on the rise.
Yeah.
Which has obviously lots of mental and emotional consequences, right, including suicide, et cetera, right? I do think that being able to connect to yourself in a meaningful, authentic, fulfilling way, being able to connect in that way with others, man, that is pretty darn cool. And something to really, really be proud of, and something to certainly strive for. We always talk about being on the court or being in the arena, again, as, work harder, work longer hours, work smarter, get that better job. Okay, great. Go for all that. How about seeking your truth?
Yeah.
How about, calling your sibling and having, that kind of conversation, or at least trying to find people you can have that conversation with.
It's life-changing.
It is.
It's something that I've realized. I always felt that I had close relationships until I actually had close relationships, right? I always felt that Nick and I had a good relationship until we had a great relationship.
Right.
And the thing that, and that's something that became really clear for both of us is, what kind of relationships do we want? We don't want surface level.
Right.
I want relationships where my friend can call me and say, hey, we can't show up for each other that way. And she knows she can call me and she knows that I'll receive it, even though it was hard. I want those relationships where we can say, hey, you took a lot.
Right.
As my older sibling. And right. I see that and naming that. And the thing that, and it's been for me, it's been a relatively newer, right? Because I mean, in the grand scheme of my 42 going on 43 years, it's really been the last 5 to 6 years. And it is just so much better. Life is so much better. Life is so much better in being able to and I have to name this. And there's elements of having a privilege to be able to do that work, right?
Yes.
Because when you are thinking about where's my next meal coming from my kids, your mindset is totally different. So I want to just name that. Some of this self-actualization work comes when your basic needs are met. And so people don't feel down on themselves or I have to name that privilege. But it's just better. I'm more fulfilled. I'm happier. I'm more joyful. I'm more relaxed. It's, I have this core circle of people who we could talk about anything, and it would be okay. And that's the thing that drives me is you don't even realize how good it can be when you're able to be connected to you and be connected to other people in a really meaningful way, in whatever way fulfills you, right? Whatever that looks like for you.
Absolutely. This has been a really fulfilling week for me, right? I described the conversation with my sister Saturday night with another couple. They wanted to celebrate my birthday on the early side. It's not yet, but they said, hey, we'll make you dinner and all that. And they said, I'm the biggest Beatles geek. And they said, and they found all these LPs in the building in their basement. Somebody had left them there. Anyway, they said, we're going to listen to all of these LPs. We listened to about 7 hours. I know. It didn't feel like it though.
Yeah.
But for 7 hours.
I'm not responding.
Yes.
Holy shit, 7 hours. I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, we got there at 5 p.m. and it was midnight and we're listening to all these Beatles albums and we're talking about politics and we're throwing in SNL in the middle of it and I walked away going, man, I'm the richest man in town. I'm like, this is pretty darn cool. Regardless of my title at work and regardless of how much I'm making and regardless of how many clicks I get on a post on LinkedIn or whatever the case may be. And I'm not, again, belittling those things because that is also part of my experience. It's part of my expression. And it starts with me, which is I love listening to Beatles. I love talking about politics. I love having heated conversation. When I say love, I'm telling I could be the healthiest human being if I just did that every Saturday night. And I did, right? And that to me was that's the best birthday gift I can give myself is to say yes to that invitation and to say, wow, I've attracted this into my life. This is available to me. How do I activate more of this? And I think that's available to all of us if we just start to untangle a bit, give ourselves permission, and really know that we can really matter by just focusing on us. We don't need other people to tell us how much we matter or the opposite for that matter.
Coach Nick Papadopoulos, that feels like the place for us to wind down our conversation.
Too, right?
Yeah, that was good. That was a nice pulling together. I clearly could talk to you all day, and we need to make sure that it's not 2 years.
Absolutely.
You're such a gift. And for people who are listening who go, I need more of Coach Nick in my life, I'm thinking, what's the best way for people to find your work and connect with you?
The easiest way, I have a website, coachnick, all one word, .com. My email is coachnick@coachnick.com. I try to keep it simple, especially for myself, starting with myself. So coachnick.com or coachnick@coachnick.com is the easiest way to get a hold of me. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate the space that you've created for folks like me to come and share and connect with you and talk about really important topics. So hopefully this was valuable for folks. And I like you, I enjoy our relationship. I enjoy connecting with you. I feel successful right now.
I do too. I'm
I'm hanging out over here doing this with you. I'm like, this is great.
I feel complete.
Right? I'm great. Exactly. I'm whole.
I feel very complete. I'm so grateful for you, my friend. Thank you for being
so much.
you. Thank you. Be well.
Yes. Thank you.
Our guest this week has been Nick Papadopoulos, and you can hear in the conversation, there were so many moments. One of the things that I didn't share that I'm holding on to, and I want to have a conversation with my husband and my colleagues, is just really defining what would success look like in our relationship. What would that be? And how do we be really intentional about it? And I want to hear from you. What resonated for you? Maybe what have you shed? What have you let go of? What do you want to let go of so you can connect with your true self? You can always reach out to us at podcast@sarahnollwilson.com. And just so you know, I read all of them and I respond to all of them. And I do love to hear from you. So send us your thoughts. What resonated for you? What came up for you? You can send that email to podcast@sarahnollwilson.com. You can also send me direct messages on social media. I'm predominantly on LinkedIn. That's the best way to connect with me. And if you want to support the show, there's a couple ways you can do that. First, easy, is to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform. This helps with our numbers, exposure, and to be able to bring on amazing guests like Nick Papadopoulos. Another way you can support the show is financially by becoming a patron. You can go to patreon.com/conversations on conversations, where 100% of your financial support goes to the team that makes this show possible. So not only do you get to feel good about that, but you get some pretty great swag and you get early episodes without ads. So it's a win-win-win. Speaking of the team that makes this show possible, let's give some love to the crew, to our producer, Nick Wilson, to our sound editor, Drew Noll, to our transcriptionist, Becky Reinert, our marketing consultant, Jessica Burge, and the rest of the Snowco crew. I am so fortunate and grateful for all of you. And finally, a thank you to Nick Papadopoulos for bringing his heart, bringing his insight, bringing his generosity and his wisdom. So grateful to have him on the show. Well, my friends, that's it. This is another episode of Conversations on Conversations. Thank you all so much for showing up, for listening. And remember, when we can change the conversations we have with ourselves and others, we can change the world. So till next week, please be sure to rest, rehydrate, and I'll see you again soon.